Integrity is when your ideals, your values match your actions. And if you were to judge me by my ideals and my values, you'd be really inspired. You'd be moved at my nobility. But if you were to judge me by my actions, you'd be like, what a lazy, slovenly piece of shit.
No, I got to get my shit together, right? Like the other day, I hit rock bottom in the sense that, like, usually what I'll do is I'll smoke weed and then binge eat and then just watch YouTube and then masturbate, like finish it off with a bit of self-love. And because like weed makes you forgetful, I masturbated and then I kind of like came out of my cum coma. I was like, oh, what am I going to do now? Oh, I'll masturbate. Like I forgot that I just masturbated.
So I looked up the peer-reviewed literature on integrity in order to see if I can understand why we struggle to integrate our values with our actions. So I found a paper on integrity in relation to students cheating on their exams. So basically, most of the students that cheated knew that cheating was wrong, but they would find a way of rationalizing it and justifying it. And this process is called cognitive dissonance. When there's a mismatch between our beliefs and our actions, we desire to get those things back in line. And there's two ways we can do it. We can either change our actions so they match our beliefs, or we change our beliefs to match our actions. Guess which one takes less effort? So basically, when you lack integrity, your brain just follows your actions trying to justify it to yourself. Like your brain gets reduced to becoming a scummy defense lawyer for the criminal behavior you're engaged in. Like I do it all the time. I'll be like, oh, I should do productive work, so my life's in a better position. So I want to have a family. My kids don't have to go to scum school and I can afford braces for them, whatever. But instead of doing productive stuff, I'll just slimy slice my life away. I'll be like, oh, Shane, you should have a shower first. Oh, but, then you should have a wank because, you got to wank. If if you wank, you won't have all that background sexual frustration. So you'll be more productive. Oh, okay, actually, it makes sense. Oh, well, now that you've had a wank, you've spent a lot of energy. So you should probably eat something. And, 3 hours later, oh, it's too late to start now. I should just watch some YouTube and try again tomorrow. Because I lack integrity, I tend to keep friends in my life that also lack integrity. So a good example as a case study is my friend David Leary. Like a lot of people will say to Dave, oh, Dave, you're a loser. You haven't achieved anything. You're unsuccessful. And he'll say, no, I am successful. I always wanted to be a loser. So that's him changing his beliefs to match his actions. This other friend of mine recently got diagnosed with diabetes, sugar aids. A few years ago, he was telling us, oh yeah, I'm actually trying to put on more weight. And that's an example of cognitive dissonance because he was getting fatter because he couldn't control his eating. But rather than admit to himself that he's out of control, he's changed his beliefs to be like, no, I wanted to eat Chocky Bickies at 3 a.m. I'm in control. This is fine. So I've hung shit on my friends. I'll give you an example of what a self-deceptive piece of shit I can be. So I was dating this girl in Sydney and I moved back to Brisbane and I broke up with her on the phone. I was like, oh, I'm just not ready to be in a relationship, when in actuality, I just wanted to sleep around. And I started seeing someone in Brisbane and then I went back down to Sydney and I told her, hey, I'm in town. You want to catch up? She met up with me. She was like, had makeup on. She looked really beautiful. I was like, hey, how you been? And I told her that I was seeing someone in Brisbane. And she was like really upset. She's like, oh, well, you lied to me. And if you told me that in advance, I probably wouldn't have wanted to meet up with you. And I was like, hang on, just 1 second, one moment, please. And I went into the other room and I called the girl in Brisbane and I broke up with her, like then and there. And then I went back to that girl and I was like, oh, I just broke up with the other one. I'm single now. And because, I thought it might lead to sex. And she was disgusted and she just left. And in my brain, I was like, oh, well, there you go. That's what you get when you try to be honest and you do the right thing, you get punished. Like, I actually felt like I was the victim in that situation. How fucking crazy is that? Pretty morally disgusting, right? But in my defense, I was smoking a lot of weed at the time. So is that cognitive dissonance, me saying that then? Yeah, probably. But it's also true that when you're intoxicated, you're probably more likely to be able to manipulate yourself. Like you're more gullible when you're drunk or you're stoned. It's harder to have integrity when you're punching cones all day.
Has anyone ever tried to quit smoking? Yeah? And did you find you would like make excuses to smoke? To keep doing it. Like you'll be like, oh, I haven't had a cigarette for a week. I think I've earned a cigarette. Oh! I've earned this. I really have. I've earned this. I'm winning by cheating. Yeah, like you delude yourself. Like, you know how in America, how they have those really right-wing politicians in America that are really anti-gay people. How they always catch those guys sucking dick. I wonder if they go through the same kind of mental gymnastics. Oh, go on, Gary. You've had a big day screaming about the gays. Go on, you've earned this dick, mate. Yeah, treat yourself. No, it's Friday night, mate. You've had a big week. You deserve this dick, mate. You quit tomorrow. Tomorrow never comes. But Gary does.
So to recap, this process of cognitive dissonance and a lack of integrity caused one person to limit their potential. It's caused another person to get sugar aids, which might mean they have an earlier death. And in my example, I've gone around hurting other people, probably making them less able to trust people in an intimate setting, as well as sabotaging my own capacity for intimacy and psychological development. Now, though, just a few examples. Now, if you scale that process up from the individual to how it affects society in general, or the nation, or the planet, you might be able to argue that cognitive dissonance is an existential threat to our species. And this lack of integrity might be the thing that causes other problems downwind, like climate change or nuclear war, whatever people are really, worried about. It could be that those things are a symptom of a lack of integrity. But people like holding up signs thinking they're going to address that symptom when the cause is a lack of integrity. How about that, huh? When was any of the social thinkers like Karl Marx talking about integrity? In fact, I reckon Das Kapital might have just been his version of cognitive dissonance so he could justify to himself for his own lack of integrity, because he was sponsored by some dude who owned a factory. So he's like, oh, well, if I'm writing a book saying capitalism is bad, it's okay that I get everything paid for. I'm good, man. So luckily in this paper, they talk about a possible antidote. So they found that students were less likely to cheat on their exams if they were made to read an academic integrity statement. And apparently the process of why that works is when things are sort of ambiguous or unclear, like cheating, it's easier to have cognitive dissonance, like make it a gray area. They might be able to justify it to themselves. Well, it's a closed book exam, but these are my notes, and if I get a job out in the workforce, I can Google shit, so it's not really cheating, and blah 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 blah. But if you have that ethics statement, they have to read over it, and things that were unclear become clear and obvious. It makes it kind of harder for you to have that cognitive dissonance process. So as a possible suggestion to not cheat in your life, because when you take shortcuts and you don't do what you should be doing, you're kind of cheating yourself. It might be useful, and this is what I'm going to try, is create my own ethics statement to read over every morning and sign it and date it. That way it's a little bit harder to bullshit myself when I'm like, oh, I'm just going to have a coffee, wank, biscuit, sleep and nap, see a friend, instead of doing the things that I know I should be doing. Perhaps this is the role classical religions had in people's lives, was to remind them to be a good person and to not be a cheating, self-deceptive dog. Now, it wasn't perfect, but it might have had an impact. It might have reminded people to act more ethically, in the same way as getting students to sign an academic integrity sheet, so that it's harder to have cognitive dissonance and it's harder to do the wrong thing. And yes, religion's done a whole bunch of dumb shit, but there might be some benefits, even if people aren't conscious of why it's working and helps the civilization thrive. It's having the effect regardless of all the Harry Potter nonsense that's attached to it. It's causing the right actions to play about. And I think it's good, to pray 5 times a day like a Muslim, or to meditate like a Buddhist, might help with that integrity. It's sort of like a pop-up on. So if your mind is a computer, when you install things on your computer, it has that "Are you sure you wish to continue" thing. So perhaps by having a religion, when you're tempted to doing really naughty shit, it's like having a pop-up ad saying, "Are you sure you wish to be a piece of shit?" which might make it less likely that you act like a piece of shit. And I really regret that, you know, in my Australian society, we don't really have a religion. Yes, there's Christianity, but I'm not a fucking idiot. I can't believe in the Harry Potter shit. But I can definitely respect it and its influence, perhaps, you know, in a way that I couldn't when I was like a teenage atheist. It's all dumb, poo-poo, man. And so I miss that religious experience that, you know, I don't get to have in my life. And the closest thing I have to a communal gathering where we all try to work towards integrating our values into our actions is Centrelink. You know, and you can't pray to Centrelink 5 times a day. You know, get down and kneel to your closest Centrelink and whisper to yourself, yes, I will look for 20 jobs a fortnight. If you're listening to this, you're not in Australia, that's our social welfare provider thing. So integrity seems to have a model of 2 steps. One, knowing the difference between right and wrong, and then the second step, which is enacting it. So there's a moral hierarchy in society, I reckon, where there's people who don't know the difference between right and wrong. They're sort of just running around, being, you know, going from hedonic pleasure to hedonic pleasure like a teenager. Like, some people never grow out of that teenage phase. And then there's people who do the wrong thing but are able to justify it to themselves. And then there's people who know the right thing to do but don't do it and feel shit about it. That's me. I'm in the moral middle class. And then there's people who know the right thing to do and actually do it. And boy, am I jealous. They say that integrity is measured in units known as scraps. For example, his last scrap of integrity. And they also say that integrity is doing the right thing when no one else is watching. I'll give you an example. So during COVID lockdown, I didn't have a job, but my girlfriend did. She'd go do a healthcare job and help save people's lives. And I would stay at home masturbating, playing video games all day. And in the last hour, when I knew she was going to come home, I would start cleaning up. That way, when she came home, she would see me cleaning. And I'd be like, oh, hey, babe. And she would be like, what did you do all day? I was like, oh, very busy, so many projects. Or I'd lie to her and I would trade my last scrap of integrity in order to buy her respect for me while losing my own self-respect. And this is this problem that I've had where I didn't realize that I could have integrity and get self-respect rather than trying to convince others of the person that I wanted to be. You can actually cut out the middleman with integrity.
Right? Like, does anyone remember that show Pimp My Ride? Where they put like an aquarium in some guy's ute? As if that's the answer. As if that's going to stop the screaming at 3 a.m. at night. Going, why am I alive? You know, like the solution should be to develop the aquarium within. What about that show, Pimp My Character?
So in terms of trying to cultivate my integrity, I think you got to have a role model, you know, someone to look up to. For me, Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic philosopher, is a good example of someone with integrity. He said that the king's job is to do the right thing and to be hated for it. So for example, like, he was against the gladiators in the Colosseum. He thought it was stupid. Like, oh yeah, cool, people hacking each other to death. What a fucking barbaric, cruel thing, you fucking idiots, right? And he tried to get them to stop it, but that was really unpopular because everyone loved the gladiators. So what he managed to do is to get them have like blunt swords instead of like sharp swords. So he did the right thing even though people hated it for it. So often our behaviors are motivated subconsciously to get other people to approve of us, to gain social status. But to have integrity, sometimes we have to lose other people's respect or social status in order to gain our own self-respect. Trading scraps for status, instead trading status for scraps of integrity. And that brings me to the next Marcus Aurelius quote. He said, "You suffer justly because you choose to be good tomorrow rather than today." I think that makes a lot of sense because we often lose our own self-respect because we make up excuses like, oh, well, I'll do it tomorrow, and right now I'll eat cheese and masturbate. But when you do that, you're losing self-respect, and so you suffer justly because of it. So the benefits of pursuing integrity is that if you can save up enough scraps of integrity, you can actually afford to look at yourself in the mirror without disgust. If you have enough integrity, when people ask you, what did you do today? it doesn't feel like a personal attack. I also read that integrity is what makes people leaders, because people will eventually notice if someone has integrity and then they'll follow them. So paradoxically, all this time that I tried to pursue social status so I could get rewards like a nice car and all this kind of stuff, I was going about it the wrong way when I should have been focusing on integrity. Because if you have integrity, then people are like, oh, well, he's good. And then you get that promotion and, you know, women will find you attractive and people will respect you. But I was going in the opposite direction, trying to get money so I could get status, so I could respect myself, instead of trying to respect myself by following my ideals. Like, having integrity is like going direct to the buyer for self-esteem. Like, instead of trying to get self-esteem through the opinions of others, you go into the farmer's market, getting the organic shit. The other benefit of integrity is that I think it might be the antidote to a lot of existential terror. For example, Marcus Aurelius, when he first became emperor, walked around the palace pointing at shit that was expensive and went, oh, sell that, sell that, sell that, I don't need that, sell that. And he got rid of all these luxuries because he thought it was more valuable or more ethical to sell them rather than for him to be comfortable or have fancy shit around him. And he's also the leader of the first state that's publicly funded orphanages to look after all the kids without parents and shit. And how's that for your high score? Like, he knows that when he dies, that was his achievement. So, you know, when you finish the video game and it comes up, like, you know, you're playing Pac-Man and it shows like all the high scores. So for like the game of life, Marcus Aurelius had like a higher score, like first orphanage, 10,000 points. And like, you know, like, oh, Shane, he smoked a heap of weed. Like, you're not even going to get on the high scoreboard.